Whew. Good morning, everybody. So, yeah, starting off for however long this season lasts. We're starting at 7:45. Made that change last week. And I'm trying to work out before my video. And so if I'm out of breath and sweaty, I'm sorry. At least you can't smell me. And that's on the bright side, right? All right, so we are in Numbers chapter 13. Interesting. So a cross-reference, because in Deuteronomy 1:22, even before we start, I'm going to flip over to Deuteronomy chapter 1. And it says in Deuteronomy 1:22, Moses is now reminding them of what happened. And he says, every one of you came near to me and said, let us send men before us. Let them search out the land for us and bring back word to us of the way by which we should go up and of the cities into which we shall come. So the Israelites requested to go. They wanted to go and spy out the land. And so the Lord spoke to Moses back in Numbers 13, verse 1. Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers, you shall send a man, every one a leader among them. So Moses sent them out from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of the Lord, and all of them men who were heads of the children of Israel. And so they named the men from verses 4 down to 15, right? These are the names of the men whom Moses sent out to spy. And Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua. And it's interesting because it is like the same name. And Hoshea, Hosea, all similar names. Or I mean, just the spelling differences. People noteworthy in verse 6 is Caleb, representing the tribe of Judah. And Joshua, the son of Nun, in verse 8, representing the tribe of Ephraim. And so Moses sent them out to spy the land of Canaan and said, go up this way into the south, go up to the mountains, see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many, whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, the cities, are there camps or strongholds, whether it's rich or poor, whether there are forests there or not, be of good courage, verse 20. Be of good courage, bring some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So they went up, they spied out the land, from Zin to Rehob, near the entrance of Hamath. They went through the south and came to Hebron, and it just names all these cities. And it mentions there in verse 22, the descendants of Anak were there. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. So it's giving some dates and stuff. Now Anak, are we going to get to that in here? I guess we'll get down a little bit in verse 33. We'll get to verse 30. Let's just do the whole chapter. I said part 1, but we might get this whole thing done today. They came to the valley of Eshcol, where they cut down a branch of the cluster of grapes. They carried it between two of them on a pole. So they brought some of the pomegranates and figs. And the place is called the valley of Eshcol, which is a cluster, because of the cluster which the men cut down. They returned from spying the land after 40 days. There's always that 40 days of separation. It's kind of a thing we see. Moses for 40 days, Jesus for 40 days. Here they go into the land, the wilderness for 40 days. Now this cluster of grapes, don't be mistaken here. We're not talking about grapes the size of beach balls, but I've seen pictures. I looked them up on the internet. I've shared them, I think, at church, where there are clusters of grapes, where there are so many grapes. We're talking like a 2 to 3 foot tall. It's like a cluster upon a cluster upon a cluster upon a cluster, where it's just so many grapes, it's insane. So it's not that there's larger than life grapes, it's the fact that the cluster just had so many grapes on it. It took 2 guys carrying this thing to bring it back. So they depart, they get back to the congregation, they show the fruit. Verse 27, we went to the land where you sent us. Truly it flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the lands of the south. The Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites dwell in the mountains. Canaanites by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan. So you see there's all the different tribes there. And Caleb quieted the people, said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land, which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. And we saw the people whom we saw are men of great stature. They are giants. The descendants of Anak came from the giants, and we are like grasshoppers. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." So here we have now a later mention of giants. Now our word here is Nephilim, and everyone loves talking about the Nephilim. So we've got Nephilim in the land. What are the Nephilim? If you flip all the way back to Genesis 6, I'm not doing a long Nephilim talk. I've done long Nephilim talks before at our church. But back in Genesis 6, in chapter 6, verse 4, it says, "There were Nephilim, giants, on the earth in those days, and also afterwards." Now, people try and explain this different ways, but when the Jewish people wrote the Septuagint, 70 Jewish scholars translated the Old Testament from Hebrew, a language which many Jews didn't even know that well, into Greek, which at the time, this was post-Alexander the Great conquering, so everyone spoke Greek at that point. They translated it into Greek. And it's worth noting the words that those scholars chose to use, because it tells us what these ancient Jewish scholars believed the words were meant to mean. For instance, some people say, well, Red Sea could really mean Reed Sea, like it's like a swamp. Well, when the Septuagint writers wrote it in Greek, they used the Greek word for red, which means nothing like a reed. And here, some people say, well, the Nephilim, it could mean something else. The sons of Seth, this and that, or they're the whatever. But the Septuagint writers, they put the word gigantes, giants. And here, we find that the Anakim is just putting the I-M, which is, we put an S for plural. The Jews put I-M. Cherub, cherubim, I-M. Seraph, seraphim. Anak, the Anakim, the sons of Anak, they were giants. We read that there were giants in the land before Noah, and there were also some giants afterwards. People ask, well, how the giants survive? Well, the reality of it is Noah was pure in his genealogies. That's what it says in Genesis 6, in a sense that he had no giant blood in him. And thus his 3 sons were pure. But it doesn't tell us about their wives. And there's the possibility that one of the wives maybe had part giant blood. And you actually follow the gene pools down. If you do your genealogies down, you'll find that there's one branch you go and you'll find these giants. And the giants will be in the land. And the Israelites are going to have to go and slay these giants. Eventually, by the time you finish the books of Moses, they'll say that all the giants get wiped out, except for some giants who survived. And they survived in the cities of the Philistines. And later on, we will find a few of these giants still alive. They are Goliath and his 4 brothers. And so the idea simply was that Goliath now, he comes down. We're actually, as we move forward through the books here, of the books of Moses, you'll find, my brain's going blank, he had the big bed. This is what happens when I try and teach the Bible after I exercise. All my blood is not working. Og of Bashan. Og of Bashan. In fact, I don't have to go too far. This old book, The Giants of Bashan, or the cities of Bashan, and the Syria's holy places. This was written a couple hundred years ago. And in it, they were able to explore the Holy Land before much of the modern development of the area. And they talked about in the cities of Bashan, there were still these rock cities that had iron doors that were 10, 12 feet tall. And they would still actually swing nicely on their things. And the funny thing is, if you look at the ancient construction of buildings, doorways were typically low and you would actually dip your head to go in. And the funny thing is they might have had 10-foot doors that people had to dip their head to go in. Og of Bashan's bed was something like 13 feet long. And again, we're talking about a day and age when people didn't build these things oversized, so I could have a bed that's twice as tall as me, just for the fun of it. No, the idea is Og of Bashan might have been a couple of feet taller than Goliath. And Goliath was 9.5 feet tall. So you got to think, these are some big, big dudes. When we did David and Goliath at my church, we drew a picture of Goliath on the back wall so people could see how big Goliath was. And then I even took a big long pole and I stuck a 10-pound weight at the end of it because it said that the head of Goliath's spear was 10 pounds. And I'm a stronger guy. And that's hard to wield. It really is. You put 10 pounds on the end of a stick and that leverage, it's like, it's so hard. And so I just wanted people to see, like, man, Goliath was huge, but Og was bigger. And the people that Caleb had to fight, Caleb, it's at Hebron. Kirjath Arba was the older name, and Hebron is the more modern name. But that's the mountain where the giants were. And Caleb is one of the oldest men by the time they go in there, right? Caleb and Joshua get to out-survive the 40 years of all the people who die in the wilderness. And this old man in his 80s, Caleb, I want to go fight the giants, and I want to live where the giants are. And so as we look at all these people who turned away from the promised land, they turned away from God's promises because they saw obstacles and they didn't want to do it. Let's not let that be us, right, church? God has promises for us. And it might look like there are giants in our way. But like Caleb and Joshua, whatever. If God is for us, who can be against us? And again, the enemy, Satan, he wants to put up giants before you that look like you can't defeat them and cannot face them. But ultimately, what can they do to us? If God is for us, who can be against us? And so don't miss out on God's promises. Don't miss out on his plan for your life because you see obstacles that look really hard to overcome. Impossible. But if God is for us, who can be against us? All right, I guess we got the whole chapter done in one day. So chapter 14, I'll see you guys tomorrow at 7:45. God bless you guys.